easiest way to get into the
Hi everyone, this is Josh DeBold from integratingpresence.com, and I'm here with Randy Green once again. Randy called me in here saying we need to do a podcast, and I'm like, okay, didn't ask questions, have no idea what this is about, so liken this to some kind of Zen training or something. So Randy, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for indulging in my need to do a podcast.
What's on your mind?
Yeah, that's a good question. Because many things are always on my mind. I could have done this kind of on my own, thinking about these processes, but sometimes it's good to have one to play a little bit ping pong with. It goes into, I've touched ground with some of it on my Randy Green 2025 timeline YouTube channel. In my walk and talks about how reality is changing. I have also on the Exosystemic High Awareness Forum, I've got some podcasts that I made last year actually talking about the new reality programs, which people can get access to for free. So they're explaining some of the new challenges that we have as part of humanity. But so that's kind of it. There's another leg to this as well that goes with AI, because that's, I think, in terms of we are having the shift from fourth cycle into fifth cycle. We are having reality changes. We are having different new types of reality programs. And many people will say, well, is that similar to the programs that we learned of in the movie The Matrix? And I will say, no, that's not the case. But where I want to begin this and in a way perhaps ask you the question, how do you perceive, Josh, AI? What's your take on it?
Well, I'd like to be able to speak more to the levels of how you've put it in a lot of the courses of alien invasion technology. It depends what level we're talking about. We're talking kind of the base program level. I think the biggest thing in the news here recently, this being the 18th of March, right? No, yeah. 2023, at least I know the year. There's the generative predictive training, GPT. So this is a new chatbot that's come out from OpenAI, right? And I'll just start with a specific here, maybe to frame it, because this is what's been on my mind lately about this. And I've got a chance to use it without registering through a Telegram channel. You get 10 things a day limit. And I was not too impressed with it, actually. But where do I even start with this? In general, that service is interesting. It's the big question I have around that is, why is this thing, they don't know, this was real telling for me, sorry, stumbling all my words here. They don't know exactly how it works. So if they don't know how it works, how do they know it's even that? So, I mean, what else is going into it? If they can't rule out some kind of direct, quote unquote, alien influence to it, I mean, if they can't rule that out, then how do we know it's not the case? I think it's actually far beyond what, people in the mainstream think it is, obviously. I know I've had some weird things happening let's look at my experience. I've had weird things happening online. Most people could say this too, kind of unexplained things happening. Even in 2003, I had an old computer. It was glitched out. The screen was glitched out. I don't know if it's AI. I took pictures of this, all these different errors, seemingly out of nowhere. I mean, I don't know enough about tech, but basically, let me ask the follow-up question here, because I could just go on and on for days and days covering all kinds of different areas in things like this. So I guess I would need more of a specific question here to narrow it down a little bit.
Yeah, but I think it's good too, because this is the whole theme of it. I think the first level of this is to put out there quite clearly, that from my perspective of things and my perception and what I know and what I have got of intel is that, and you say, who you got the intel from? Well, the different factions that I'm in communication with. And they could be completely manipulating with everything. They could be saying this to seed it in. And that's why when I got the new reality program information 2018, I didn't make it until 2021 because I sat on that information to see whether or not it was actually going to unfold. But as I saw how the amplification vector played in with the different groups within psychology, within science, within technology, within the monetary system, and with the health system, these are the 5 tiers they're working on to alter reality, then it became quite clear to me, okay, something is definitely going on. And I think it's in that perspective that we need to see things. The understanding of how our reality is being terraformed. That's kind of where I want to go. But I also want to go with, when we talk about AI, we have the frequency-based AI that now is connected to the Google quantum computer. So we have Microsoft, we have Google, we have OpenAI that are playing with AI, connecting them to quantum computers. And that's for me where things begin to get really, really dangerous. Because they're, without having the great sciences of it, but we are there playing with probabilities and possibilities. And quantum computers can run multiple scenarios of if that happened, if then what will happen. And that's where the AI comes in to calculate all of this. And the latest addition in the Fermilab that they have done, which people can look up on the internet themselves, was that they actually gave this quantum computer a framework from where it could operate, connecting it to AI. So they began the whole shebang, which leads to, in the future, different types of what we call alteration programs where we do have the singularity event. And the singularity event, as far as I understand, is where technology begins to literally modify itself and become what we would call an entity, a conscious entity, not conscious as we understand it, but conscious enough that it begins to make decisions on behalf of humanity. And we've seen that in the movie I, Robot, for instance, which is a very good movie that portrays some of these issues that we can have if a singularity event happens. And in that movie, I actually think that some of the spheres in the quantum computer, future quantum computers, are actually depicted there as how they look in the future. So there are issues going on here with the Fermilab quantum computer. Why did they connect these two things? What was the goal of it? The goal was, aside from, of course, getting into science and nature and get their little run through of their scientific experiments and being known out there, having the name and get some kind of position, which we know science community, unfortunately, are playing within more than considering, should we actually do this? The goal for them was to actually try and create a wormhole, try to create an Einstein-Rosen bridge using what we could call the entanglement principles, where you have 2 different positions in space-time that you then connect. And here they have used a quantum computer and AI to do so. And that's why the problem arose, because from the moment that happened, these Fermi bridges, as they're called in the future, got a connection into our reality. And that's where the future AI is now beginning to come our way. And that's actually what I want to talk about. Because we're not now only talking about what we humans do of stupidities. Sorry for saying so, again and again and again and again. Even everyday humans are constantly repeating their mindless stupidities. And I'm doing that as well to some degree. And we need to be much more mindful of what we do and what we think and how we act and how we are observing reality and interacting with reality as our reality system changes. But aside from that, we are now dealing with another unknown. And this is a huge unknown because it's an unknown that is smarter than we are, that plays on multiple timelines, that plays on holographic sciences, that plays on consciousness principles, that plays on human history, that plays on human genome modification programs, that plays on the ability to terraform realities. It's not standard AI with algorithms and what they are testing right now. These AI interface systems, as they are now, are being connected via Fermi bridges from the future to the future AI. So that means our standard AI in this reality, where the ones that are running it think that they are just running it computer-wise using algorithms and something they have got under control. They have not, because the moment the Fermi bridge was created, that changed. That was the game changer, and that's for me where we are now. That's some of the things that I do not have any solutions to it, but it is where we begin to look at our technology and say, okay, perhaps things are moving a little bit faster than we anticipated. So how do we position ourselves for that event that is going to hit us to some degree? How far do we know what we're actually seeing on the internet now is actual? It's not just false flag or fake or deep fake or whatever it is. That's humans that are doing this. Now we are having programs that are run from the future and are intercepting our virtual reality, our internet, plotting in information that might be created in the future. We have seen movies with that as well, altering our current reality field. And that is possible because that has already been played out by the Greys and some of their interactive simulation programs, which Michael Newton in his books unknowingly actually refers to. He actually shows some of these showrooms where people can choose different timelines to integrate and themselves into as part of their next life. That I call that the tourism industry. But of course, Michael Newton didn't know of that. He just did a good job back in the 2000s, being a kind soul that just wanted to help humanity, of course.
So many great points. And so now I know where this is going. I want to go back and build up from the base program and get to where we are now with a preferencing this with, I've had some experience in the online marketing world years ago. And so I can speak to some of these things where I can kind of see them in my own experience. But then once we hit the CERN and the other particle colliders, this is where I have background in the information, but as far as firsthand experience with this, I can really just ask questions and give speculation on that. Well, some of the other stuff is too, but it's more firmly grounded in things. So we start off with the 5 areas you talked about. I want to get those straight again. Monetary, health. What were the other ones?
Monetary, health, science. Well, not monetary, financial system,
sure.
Science, health, psychology, and now I forgot the last one.
That's
myself.
Okay. Well, if they come up.
Yeah.
But the reason this has gained even more popularity in the mainstream here recently, besides Elon Musk, right? This guy's been talking about, which I never really understood, it's cognitive dissonance for me. Yes, AI is a threat. Okay, they can take us over. So what's he want to do? He wants to merge with machines. Wait, what? I'm sorry. Something's going to kill you and you want to merge with it? That does not make sense to me. But I want to talk about Kissinger next.
Yes, but let's do the EM first. And I'm deliberately just doing
the refer to that
EM, which was name we mentioned before, because EM is behind OpenAI. EM was behind PayPal. EM was behind many of these things that have led to this.
Neuralink and the satellites, right?
Yes,
yeah.
SpaceX and all of these things. Now he has taken over Twitter. He is literally moving, EM is moving through all of the different information systems. For me, he is the tool that leads to this bridging in. So I'm enormously suspicious of everything whatever that
sounds like a computer, right?
Has done.
That just the name sounds like it's some kind of weird technology device.
Well, let's not speculate on that one.
Right, I'm being
but
silly,
I'm just
of course,
saying,
yes.
if we do connecting the dots, it's so popular said, and look into the pattern of where he has put in with the car industry, with the money industry, with the tech industry, with the computer industry, no matter where you touch ground, the space industry, that man has literally touched ground with everything that is part of our infrastructure. And that is where I get really, really worried, because why is that?
Fingers in a lot of pies he has.
Yes. But infrastructure.
Yeah.
If we talk about what's the quickest way to take over a system, you go for the infrastructure. Sure. And if we have technology as part of our infrastructure, that's where you would, from the future, you would target a system. You don't bomb out the roads You don't bomb out the military bases as we've seen in movies. You go for the information system. You go for the internet. Go for the virtual reality.
Well, that's right. And so these satellites, I think there's people tracking where they've actually not gone up into space. If something happened where they failed, all these miniature satellites up there. We had years ago people hacking into nuclear facilities, supposedly Stuxnet. So the infrastructure in there, he's got his hands in the cars and the highways. There was an underground rail system he had. I don't even know the status of that anymore. So you're right. It's covering all these bases, right? All your bases belong to us.
I want to stress here, because this is where people typically jump to the conclusion, this is human doing. And I want to say humans are tools in this.
Yeah.
Very, very important to understand. Humans are tools in this. Sometimes humans even get mind wiped, so they can't remember having done it. They are put into and it sounds like a science fiction movie. No. But
look at Tesla, right? Yeah. Where he got his ideas from, he's not even really sure. And I wonder if Elon Musk EM has said where he gets his ideas from and how he got all this stuff.
If you go back into what I call the left-wing brotherhood scientists that we have, even Einstein, they have got it as a download. Nikola Tesla got it as a download. Where do you get that information? I don't know. I just saw it in my mind. So we can go as far back as St. Paul. He's got it as a download. So we're having this. How do you alter history? You actually go in and you tamper with different forms of humans that are then seeding in that level of information, seeding in that type of technology, because you need what's called a human carrier to do so inside our reality. Grace cannot do it. They can only operate in the bridge between the fourth dimension and our reality. So they need human operators, as it's called. And I know this sounds so science fiction, as if you could use that word, as it can get. But this is, and perhaps it is manipulation. Perhaps this is just made up stories to cloak something else. What do I know?
Well, the amounts of mind control are just vast and well documented. So it would just be taking that one step further, or similar, comparingly similar to that. And I don't need to go into that because there's plenty of information online about all the different methods. And it can be just as simple as, persuasion. I mean, that's, it doesn't have to be high tech mind control either, but it can go very, very deep as well. So go ahead.
Yes, I just want to round that up saying it's important here that we don't begin pointing fingers as we saw during the pandemic, where people were we were driven by fear. Yeah. We were driven by seeing each other as the enemy. And this is not me putting out there so people begin to look at each other and say, are you under the control of Big Brother? Because that's not where we're going. Yeah. But it is important that people that are getting these including myself, getting all of these fantastic ideas, should they be put into implementation? Should we follow through with these ideas? Are we being used as a bridge, as a carrier to seeding something that links up to future timelines, that gives access for some of the future timeline entities, which some of the futures, they end up being run completely by cubes, and there are no humans left. Everybody's gone into stasis. It's only cubes that are running the future. And they're bridging back, trying to alter that future, because that's what in their directive, that they are going back in time to alter that state of humanity that's now completely in stasis. And with that, go back and begin to alter all of reality field programs, whether they are psychologically or they're actual AI technology from the hijackers or whatever perception or perspective we look at. We are now so connected to the internet that we are literally operational. The internet itself runs up subcurrent frequency levels that affects our eyes, the pixels, the LED light. We have got frequency fence, 5G, hadron colliders. You name it. We can go on and on and on, all on the different frequency levels that affects our neural network. And once all of these things are integrated, it's no big issue from cubes in the future that are created to connect to the human mind, to connect to our minds, including having used different forms of military projects, as we saw it from Russia and America and what have you, different forms of mind-altering technology. You know the names of them. You know these names better than me. Or what do you call it?
Well, MK Ultra, exactly. And then sub-projects of that, Monarch, all these types of things. Yeah. Project
and
Monarch.
The latest one, as we saw it with the Havana syndrome, which they kind of ruled off, not using technology, or whatever they came up with, the conclusions. They rise up the question before we know of it is ruled out. No, that doesn't exist. From the same people that raises the question. And for me, it's just kind of, that's a little bit funny change of heart. Are you sure you're actually in your full wits, or have you been mind wiped? So these are the questions we need to ask ourselves again.
And I want to overemphasize this point, not overemphasize, can't emphasize it enough. Continue to emphasize it. This is not for panic. So as soon as panic sets in, all this stuff that we're talking about is completely out the window, because it's pointless if the fear. I saw it during the lockdown so much. I just noticed how the state of fear people were in was actually detrimental to the immune system. And I thought that was just as much, or if not, if anything else that was involved with it or not involved with it.
But if it showed something, and again, we would play with the idea of the future AI that is now going back in time to alter the future, because that is what I'm getting. Then these different 5 layers where they're doing the new reality programs, that they're changing science and they're changing the financial system, which we're seeing now being rolled out.
Yes.
They have changed the health system, which we have seen being rolled out. Implementing different forms of technologies that years ago people would have put their foot down and say, no, that's not going to happen. Now it's completely overridden. Yep. Yes, of course we're using that as the simplest thing. That of course we're doing that. We have seen the Mandela effect. We have seen the reality change around us. We have seen things that used to be this way now suddenly is a different way. We are seeing how history changes, interestingly enough. I remember the first one where I saw that was with the whole Sagittarius arm, and now we're in the Orion arm, and science will say, well, that's because we were not accurate. Yeah, there's always good explanations for everything. It is still interesting, though. And on and on and on. So what is the purpose of changing things from the future, from these AI cubes? And that is, first and foremost, to teach humanity how to respond appropriately to these changes, and select amongst humans who can do these changes, who is ready to live up to the requirements of the needed changes to avoid the future that they come from. It's all about avoiding that future. Everybody's come back from the future. All movies, whatever we're dealing with, is always let us avoid that future. So my best solution for this one is that people, instead of saying, no, I'll do this tomorrow, or I'm not ready for the 5th cycle, I'm not ready for the outer domain energies, I'm not ready for the progression work, I'm not ready for this, I'm not ready for that, which I hear again and again and again. And I completely get that. It takes time. But perhaps we don't have that time. Perhaps someone is now making the decision for us and is selecting amongst humanity who is working to avoid that future by their everyday inner work, their everyday mindfulness, their everyday ability to make choices that do not lead to these futures. And then people would ask, what are these choices? Well, that's what the new reality program is all about, testing people. How do people respond to this scenario? How do they test to this? We're talking about algorithms, quantum computers, probability, and possibilities. How are people responding to that reality scenario? And the ones that do not panic, they are the ones that will be chosen first. The ones that do not respond to the different types of viruses, they will be chosen as well.
Yeah, so this is, I'll pick up on this, but I still want to circle back to all the other topics that we had before. Since we're on, well, no, is it okay? I'm going to go circle back, but I want to get into these cube directives, the selections, the reflections of programming in our everyday society now, media mirrors of this, and then in psyops that have been going on for a while. But going back to where I left off before, Henry Kissinger, this is a guy that he I don't know, he's older than dirt or something. I mean, he's like 2,000 years old.
I mean, about other people.
But I thought he got in on Nixon's administration or even before that. So he's very instrumental in foreign policy in the United States. And and then is it Larry Schmidt or whatever, the ex-head of Google, or maybe the CEO of Google, and some other guy, I don't know, wrote this huge or long article in the Wall Street Journal addressing just specifically this chatbot, and so they were sending alarm bells and all this stuff. And I won't go into that now, but I did a talk on my Wisdom channel about that. If anybody's interested, going through this article, I'm stumbling around a little bit. But when these people on the world stage weigh in on this, when we know it's not just people like EM and tech people that are now, people hold up EM as a tech god. I mean, some people really kind of worship this guy. We talked about frequency-based AI. and going into quantum computers too. If people don't know this, there's a commercial quantum computer called D-Wave, and this is public. People can actually buy quantum computers. They have been for a while. Their CEO said this is like worshiping at the altar of an alien god. It didn't seem like he was making jokes and things like this.
And
these are linked together.
Yeah,
supposedly they can link together. The institutions already have. I mean, these are commercially available.
Exactly.
There's some that are private. Go ahead.
And that's where with that cue I want to put in here that there with I think it was a month ago, 2 months ago. Actually, it was the moment that Fermilab connected and created the Fermi Bridge. The first one, they don't know they have done it, but this is what it is. They connected to the future. They did not create a wormhole, they created a bridge to the future. And the moment they did that, then we got what's called the time wave continuum. And it sounds science fiction again, but it is a time wave continuum. So how has time worked before? Time has been what we call irreversible. It's only gone in one direction, following the speed of the light, just going forward. But with the time wave continuum, you now can go back and forth. Now the wave energies, the wave properties of the quantum fields can now go back and forth. And we know that's possible on the quantum level. But now it's possible to do it across different, what we call sections of our universe. So this is where the quantum field has been expanded from our reality into the future realities, where time that does not exist can now ripple backwards and forwards, altering what we call the momentum of time, the amplification vector of reality changes or challenges, as I call them, because it's just as much a challenge. But when you operate the time wave continuum, when you ping between two computers, one in the future and one in the past, and you create that quantum field where you can run artificial algorithms of probabilities and possibilities, you play out different scenarios of what does humanity need to learn, and that's where our internet is being used, creating different types of scenarios which people read. And they think it's legit because these future computers, they have literally read all information systems we have. They have used, such as Facebook, which we know they're taking all information from that. I think that we know the Netflix series Time Travel that portrays that very nicely. And people say, well, Rance, just because you watch too many Netflix TV shows, and that might very well be, but it could also be that all of this has been put in as a pre-warning, which we know has been given for people.
Called predictive programming.
Yes, so that those who are being targeted for the future citizens that are avoiding the in stasis situation, because this is more complex than this, because actually some of us that are existing now, we are the ones that will be quote unquote reborn again and again, and we will become the ones that are in stasis in the future. So some of us are actually in stasis in the future because the time wave continuum now has been created. So some of us are getting in contact with our counter that is now in stasis. Just to be observant here, the Greys are also playing with clone technology in the fourth dimension, where we also have a version of ourselves in stasis, but that's a clone, that's something completely different. So we're here playing on multiple levels of how the time wave continuum can bridge between consciousness in the future and consciousness now, technology in the future and technology now, and the alteration of our reality field, testing people. How do they respond to these different programs that are now being run? And everybody's reading the news, so they think this is happening. And I know things are happening, but quite a lot of it, what we can say, for instance, with financial markets, how much of it is actually really playing out? And how much is engineered to play out via the stock market and what have you, these different, exactly, whatever we're dealing with. How many of these... I know from some of the enhanced human groups, they have created what we call subnets within not the dark web or anything, but literally subnets where they trade artificially with each other to pump up their financial value inside the base program. And it's not Bitcoin, it's not cryptocurrency, it's literally trading amongst themselves. Yeah. So they buff each other up to create
dark
value.
Pools. They're dark pools. People can look up the term dark pools, but even just with cryptocurrency itself, this is such a highly technical, specialized thing that I really don't understand. You have to really fully understand it from all the bits and pieces. It takes a really highly technical skill set to understand all what's going on and what's legit, what's not, how it all even operates to begin with. This, and then of
yes,
course.
but it's part of as Richard Dolan talked about, the breakaway civilizations. I know there are others that talked about this as well, but he's one of the, I think, has covered it very neatly and very nicely. So we are having, that's what I call the enhanced humans, because they are technically also from the future, and they are also coming back to avoid, some of them are actually living in exile in the outskirts of the Andromeda system because of what's going to unfold in our reality.
And we're going to get back to these directives. So there's, Randy mentioned about the time wave continuum. There's a term called retrocausation. This is the idea, right, that cause and then effect, right? But this is saying, okay, well, you can go, it's the reverse of that, basically. I mean, I think it's a Wikipedia article. I wanted to bring to people's attention, and then if someone hasn't heard about this, it's called the Sentient World Simulation. This is a white paper from Purdue University years ago, where anybody can read this online, where it says that they basically have a model for every individual on the planet, every man, woman, and child, and they feed every available data stream in there that's publicly available, like anything that we put into a computer system, basically, that they can have access to. Bank record, transactions, people fill out forms, all this stuff. So what they're doing is they're massing all this data, big data. That's how they make a bunch of money and can control what ads are going to serve to you, how they're going to predict your behavior to order how to change time. So this is a really simple thing for me to.
Plus.
So you can say, like, okay, just take this, people that are betting, okay, just take it from a money stand. If you have a big bet riding on whatever it is, something happens, well, then you see all these data points where you can say, well, it's a great probability if I get this person to affect a behavior in certain ways, it'll play out like this. So then they can serve ads or make certain situations or influence certain situations in life that would have a certain probability to do things in order for the people at the top or whoever's in control or has the information to move outcomes more likely in the way they want for whatever reasons they want, right? So this information, credible information, is power, and knowing how to use that, it's way more valuable than any kind of currency.
But that's also what you're describing there is also part of what's going on in the financial markets and how psychology plays a huge part, which we know. I'll not go further into that because they barely run out that program. But it all comes down to how do we respond to it? How do we prepare ourselves for whatever without creating panic, without doing stupid choices, without replaying the 2008 huge bank crack and financial crisis and what happened there, learning how to be around what we call energy and our financial system and currencies and monies and not
central bank digital currencies.
Yes, and not pumping it out artificially as we have done with so many other things. What I wanted to put in here and add in as well is that we have another player that does not understand they're actually a player in some of the alteration mechanics and dynamics that are happening right now, and that's neuromarketing. Where we are having, again, creating avatars, creating these programs of this is the perfect consumer, this is how consumers behave. And when we go and say, oh, that's plotted into computers that are now being linked up to future computer or AI that are calculating human behavior, then these will be taken also as part of an avatar, as part of this is how humans are and behave. And we have seen how the whole, not just from humans, but the internet itself is almost coming alive to, we say, oh, it's algorithms. Yeah, but perhaps it's a little bit more than that, that we are being classified as a specific avatar, put in specific boxes that are being fed specific type of information.
And once those models are built, then depending on the technology, that type of thing could be potentially transferred into clones or who knows what other programs, and then we talk about the singularity once it supposedly has conscious, right? So once that becomes, depending on how much that can be copied, where's the original version? What's that? This goes into states of being what's considered a life form, what's what's not, what's considered conscious, what has will, and these Turing tests where you can't tell it apart from a human being. All that stuff comes into play. And then we throw the time element in here. This is the more juicy stuff I want to start getting into now, that I'm just kind of theoretical on my end right now. I still have yet to find someone who could tell me the speed of time. So I've asked this question. Actually, I take that back. One guy, I still have the formula. He wrote it out, and it turns out to be 1. But anyway, so I don't know how. If we don't know the speed of time, well, then I think that's an important question too.
The question is if it actually works with Einstein's constant there, which we know is 1, and we also know that kind of the curvature of the universe has to be 1. But again, when we go into
that's the speed of light in a vacuum, right? Speed of
I
light.
can't remember. I keep thinking about the hijacker's guide to the galaxy, right?
The answer to the universe is what, 47 or
42?
42. Sorry.
Yeah. So this is, and for me the answer is very simple. Time doesn't exist.
Well, it is. It's a concept.
There is no
it's agreed upon. It's agreed upon construct.
So there is no speed of time because time doesn't exist.
Exactly. It's relative, right?
Yeah, it doesn't exist at all. Yes, we have movements, we have dynamics, we have the sun and the moon and the stars and what have you that we can see move around in certain concentric circles and orbital patterns. But is that time, or is it just a movement in space? That does not necessarily denote time. So you say, well, time is about how you move from point A to point B, how quick you can move there. And that's what Einstein came up with, say it's relative. Time is relative. So thereby you can't really say the speed of time because time is relative. It depends on the momentum and the energy momentum that you have, the frequency level or the speed of light that determines the speed of time. So
in proximity in objects, yeah. It's
not that I know if that is completely how scientists would explain it, but that's my
basically we all agree that there's this thing called time and it works this way. There's a nuclear clock or nuclear clocks, if I'm saying nuclear, I don't want to turn into George Bush Jr. here, but that, who's in charge of that? Can I write them a letter? I mean, the time authorities, that reminds me of this Loki show of the time variance authority when they go and mess up time and then the time cops come.
But if they can change the quantum field potentials, that will, without any doubt, will definitely also change time, which we have also seen. And we have seen how, for me, in my point of view, and again, remember how machines can communicate together, how they can create what we call an amplification vector. So that means that, for instance, when we have quantum computers around the planet, they team up together to create a pattern that will alter the fabric of our reality as we know of it. And whatever people then put in will be part of that change of the fabric of reality. We are also having the different hadron colliders around the planet that are part of science labs, not just the big one in CERN.
Not just CERN, but there's
the mother load.
Fermilab, and there's so many different little ones.
So many that
and they're
are
part
also,
off as experiments, but what's really going on with these behind the scenes that most people don't talk about?
That's altering the quantum field because they operate on the quantum level. They are operating on what we call, again, fabric of reality. So we're here talking about scientists that are working to change the fabric of reality as we know of it, pushing it outside the Einsteinian sciences, which is all good and fine because it's kind of outdated, but they are using technology to do so. And again and again and again, that's the problem. The technology is the key word here.
How much do these humans know, would we think? And then also, what kind of do we know how this technology, or what's the agenda? So who and what is there is there a clear agenda? It's probably multifaceted, just like everything else. And my guess would be a lot of these scientists don't know exactly what they're being used for, or the ramifications, or even what some of the things or experiments they're doing.
I'm pretty sure if you ask any scientist in CERN, they will say, well, we're doing it deep ground. So it is isolated. It will not affect other hadron colliders. They do not communicate together. And there I'll just say, without having any bigger understanding of quantum physics at all, aside from what I know, is kind of the entanglement.
Yeah. Well, not
So-
only that,
so-
if it's on a computer, if they use computers at all, if it's not now, there's a potential in the future for them to be connected. It's that simple. Yeah.
Yeah, but they are already connected. So I
Yeah,
would say
that's what I would say too.
So for me again,
Humans communicate.
yes, it would be so easy if we had villains, if we had people, the evil mastermind, because then we could jail them and put them in jail on whatever we needed to do. But this is not the case. We're having people that have families, people that are living their lives, that just want to do good, whatever that means, and whatever they're in control of, whatever their perception of good is. But everybody who works with science, they want to change the world. Some for ill, of course, but there are the one generally wants to say, I think this is good for humanity. Similar to the one that invented CRISPR, even though she had that dream of being a new Hitler because it's eugenics. And yet she still went forth with it because she described it, first and foremost, all say, well, if I don't do it, someone else will do it. And I would, if that were me, I would say, well, then I won't take that responsibility. That's not an argument for continuing to do some kind of science we know can lead to some pretty disastrous outcome. And the next one is that people then convince themselves, I do this for humanity, for the good of humanity. And then they play on that idea that they're doing it to prevent illnesses, or they're doing it for this and that and what have you, and not taking into the equation, well, what is created for good can also be created for the opposite. And I think we have Oppenheimer as the greatest example of that. And why is it so difficult for people to say, well, I want to do this for good, and sit down and contemplate for 5 seconds, perhaps we shouldn't do this. Perhaps there are other solutions that can lead to the same result. And what are we actually trying to achieve here? So again, it's a question of reality and humanity and progression of humanity.
By the way, I think Christopher Nolan, the guy that did Inception and all these other, it's going to come out with a movie on Oppenheimer. I thought I saw, but in this term "greater good," that's a red flag for me, because just the term itself, greater than what other goods, and the greater goods for who, at whose expense, at the expense of what other goods, So it's pretty simple. Now we talked about let's finally get to the directives of these cubes, because and then how we're going to respond to these things. In this day and age, with everything connected, from what I gather, lots of psychological operations are being done, have been for many, many years. It doesn't matter what an event is or isn't. They're paying close attention, maybe not a human operator, but just whatever programs they're running within data gathering, how people view it and how people respond to it. And so they're gauging, what do they call it? Sentiment analysis, how people are responding to anything, just about anything that goes on in the news, locally, maybe around topics that have been well established for eons. So this has been going on for quite a while, and now it's with all the different automation, I guess we can call this, around this, and AI involved with it. It's probably not. And then now with this chat, we can just query these machines and just kind of get. And the things in public we have access to. Probably in the private and military sector, I don't think it would be too far-fetched to say they're way far ahead of what they're throwing the public here. Yeah. Now, these cube directives we talk about, the one, and then we see the selection process. We see this in our media too. The Hunger Games. I never watched that, but we're familiar with the notion of that. There's this series on Netflix too, where there's they select all these people and then they pit them against each other as well. We've had the Survivor thing, all these different programs.
That's not the plot here. That's not the plot.
Okay,
no, the plot here is, and that's so important to understand, that we have humanity, and we have also we have different alien species that are in human form. And they are not in human form as a gray that has cloaked itself in a human form. We're talking here different types of souls, and I call souls templates. They're holographic templates that where consciousness potentials are imbued into that. It's a very advanced type of technology that are part of all advanced civilizations throughout all of the universes, past, present, and future. But these templates, they can be used in different ways. They can be used to progress consciousness via developmental programs, or they can be used to link completely up to technology and become part of drone worlds and android worlds and what have you. So they can be used for good and ill, as well as all technology can, and as all sciences can. What we're dealing with here is this kind of that we are having these cubes in the future that has been given the task of both kind of in a way transfer some of the consciousness potentials of the ones that are in stasis in the future via what we call the personality matrix. That's been transferred back in time via the time wave continuum. And I think, I forgot her name, she wrote the book Host, where she kind of alludes to some of this as well, but it's not, or altered carbon for that matter. It's not done via disks, it's done via these little spheres. And again, Michael Newton again talks about this without knowing what he thought it was the soul potentials that came from these quote unquote factories where there was these orbs that held the consciousness potentials. Simon Parkes talked about that as well years ago. So they can these orbs can transfer via the holographic network, via what we call the racial grid. And that can be transferred back from the stasis body into the current body. And what they call that is called the merge. And that's what's going on, right? First we had the purge, then we'll have the merge, which sounds but this is machine thinking. So first we were purged as in kind of the pandemic. How do we respond to the modification? How do we respond to the genetic upgrading and all of these different new levels that came from 2016? Plus, we had all of the other players that were then beginning to play in their timelines because they also wanted to ensure their futures, whether we're talking about the third cycle races, the fourth cycle races, the regress races, the future races, the parallel races, whatever we're dealing with. The grace, it doesn't matter. We're all in that huge race now because the time wave the technology has been opened up. So now everybody's running for the best possible futures that they can come up with. That also means that some of the old harvesting programs are now being completely taken off the table because they don't need that anymore. Now they can begin to transfer holographic units from the future via the time wave continuum, the bridges that are being built there. So the cubes that I am talking about, there are ill-minded cubes, of course, that are run, the Android worlds are run by cubes completely. But the ones from the future of humanity, as well as what we could say, the groups that were left of the progressive humans from the past that led to these futures as well, is to try and go back and play out different scenarios for those of us who are connected to the version of ourselves in the future to respond differently. It's all about psychology. It's all about correct choices and correct use of our capacities as an advanced civilization. Instead of going blindfolded down and use technology because we get so infatuated by it, or go blindfold down in materialistic or desires or perversion, all the other stuff that we know that's part of the human genome and the way how we've been altered because of the regress races and what's been going on here. The challenge for us that wants to kind of do the 2025 timeline, that wants to do the leap, that wants to do it's not just a frog leap where we jump over others or fight each other. It's actually the opposite. It's where we learn to work together as a team. It's all about teamwork. The computers are teaming up now. The Hadron Colliders are teaming. Everybody's teaming up now. So that's the energy that's coming in. And we failed big time throughout the pandemic. That was so sad to see. So that was the first test. And the ones that kind of were able to get the information from within what to do, that were able to follow through with what they got from within, that were able to respond in a manner that did not lead to further panic or didn't lead to further harm or didn't lead to any furtherment of what we could say would be detrimental for the continuation of humanity. They have been targeted on the different types of mini cubes that can also be traveled through light back through the time wave continuum and are now being connected to people that shows the potentials of being the ones that can be merged with their future counter. We also have the merge that are going from the parallel universal matrix races, and they're doing their merge, which they call the blend. But that's more similar to what kind of call a walk-in or a possession. And that's where they take bodies that are not theirs and connect with them. So they are taking something that's not theirs. And that's where we have the new CRISPR technologies. That's by the POM races. They're using that to get access to bodies they wouldn't have had access to otherwise. So we again talking about different groups, different factions, different agendas, but they're all doing the same thing. So for us, the discernment is to figure out, okay, what program are we under? what's influencing us.
And the transhumanist agenda comes in big time here. I know Ray Kurzweil, who was involved with Google years ago, had the transcendent man, and he's all about merging with machine. But and then the media programs that I was talking about, that seems like the polarity version of what you mentioned too, right? Mm-hmm. The opposite of that. Now, the big question that comes to mind with the cube directives is, what are the checks and balances on there? Am I getting this right, where in the future pretty much everybody's put in the stasis?
Yeah.
So then the cubes are entirely in control until they can solve the problem. However, if the program that the future humans left them with is off by just a little bit, maybe, then there's nothing balancing it, checks and balancing it, right? Like they can't ping the humans in stasis to give them an update and see if they want to change the directive in their programs for it.
They keep playing possibilities, probabilities. They keep playing, and then they do relooping. If it goes too far off track, they reloop the whole thing. We have seen that as well. We know the Greys have been doing that to us too. They already made that possible with the event program. So you can kind of say, well, the event program and what the Greys have been doing here, the abduction, all the things that they have been doing, the shenanigans since the 1950s that were invited into a reality field by humans and military projects, is what has led to that very, very disastrous future.
Yeah. And nobody's there to if there's nobody, if everybody's in stasis, then if it just goes amok relooping, which Apple's address is one infinite loop, I think too, by the way. But there's nobody to stop the relooping, right?
No, that's why you need to stop thinking as a human. You need to learn to think in probabilities and possibilities and ultimate timelines that do not loop, because the moment the time wave came in, time stopped being linear. Time stopped being what we understand as time, and all orbital dynamics as we know of it are not orbital dynamics. They are waves of energy that goes in what we call kind of wave patterns, what you call propagating waves, oscillation dynamics. So you change the oscillation dynamics of the system that you're part of, and by that change the entire configuration of it. So this is the idea with the playing of the different scenarios and probabilities. They ping different types of oscillation waves back in time into our system, makes it ripple in a different manner. And the whole question is, how does our consciousness respond to that? And that's part of what we call elevation dynamics. Do we live with these oscillation waves, which people have alluded to as ascension dynamics? Do we do what we need to do to create more teamwork, to become more inclusive, to follow the principles and guidelines of loving kindness, which means that we are technically harmless to self, others, and environment, but also understands the balancing principle of how to work with our reality field in a productive manner that leads to the highest good of the many. There's a huge difference between the greater good and the highest good of the many. Yes. Because the greater good is we crack eggs so that more can prosper, but there will be collateral damage. The highest good of the many goes in and say, the first that throws a stone, and we know that from the Old Testament, and the first that throws a stone, right? So this is about being the first of many for the highest good of the many. Everyone must take the responsibility of thinking, if everybody was doing what I'm doing, how would the world look? And begin acting in that manner.
And not from a place of superiority, but a place that there's teamwork involved and cooperation as well, right? And not being sitting on the sidelines and say, oh, well, I'm just going to wait till somebody else go first either, right? So there's a type of leadership, but also a type of, I'm not doing this for myself and to be a hero per se, this is, and
it's interesting because we actually had that principle of being equal with Augustus, or not Augustus, Alexander the Great. He was saying, sorry, not Augustus, but Alexander the Great. I think, or was it Augustus? Sorry, can't remember. Point being, we had with the ancient Greeks, we had one of these prominent figures that were philosophical as well, and said that I might be the one that goes first, but I'm just an equal like everybody else, but I'm the one that chooses to go first. So this is also the pioneering principle, where we understand that those of us who go first, and this is pioneering from the merge of who we are in the future being brought back into our brain field as it is today. and incorporating some of these ideas, which we also must be observant of, can be from the blend of the negatives. So we can't just say, oh, I got this great idea, it must be from the future, hence it must be good. Everything we do from here on must be tested. We must sit in contemplation before we act upon it. We must learn to speak prudently. We must learn to observe our emotions in mindfulness. All of these good teaching systems that were incorporated ages ago by ancient civilizations.
And that's what I was going to say next year or soon, is that, these are nothing new ideas. These ethic things are not just because we need to be goody two-shoes or some bearded figure in the sky will, kill us forever, or, I'm being silly here, but, these are for our own welfare and happiness too, and it's a training that I feel, that we can mess up and be okay with it. So I think this is where the heart qualities come in too, because this is not like a secret society selection, right? Per se,
No, it goes back, it actually goes back to the timeline event in my perception of things and what I recall. It goes back to, we had the timeline event that altered the fabric of our universal structure. That led to the breaking down of different types of genetics, of consciousness potentials and genetics that were connected. In these civilizations, consciousness and energy are interconnected into different forms. And if the fabric of reality begins to alter, then it alters the consciousness and then alters the physical form. So that's a trinity. It all works together. And with that breaking down of the original consciousness potentials and the original holographic templates, we ended up with what's called the infection. And the infection led to what's called ill-mindedness, or kind of evil thinking, or distortion.
Wanting to harm, an intent to harm.
No,
right?
not to begin with. Actually, it's delusion.
Yeah, which
it
is
began
worse,
with being
you don't
delusional.
Even know. Yeah.
The ones that back then, they denied that their consciousness potentials were beginning to change. They denied that was happening. They did not look at it. They turned the blind eye and pretended, no, I'm still as I was. This has not had any larger effect on not our reality or anything. We can fix this. We're seeing it playing out again and again. Denial.
This is an insidious thing, because on one hand you've got, I'm not affected by this. And then completely denial. But what if that's actually the case and the other party is in the wrong? Or the person just jumps to the conclusion automatically, I screwed up. Well, then if you have bad actors, bad apples come in and say, I'm sorry, you're screwed up, you're screwed up, you're screwed. Well, actually they're in the right, and they're just trying to gaslight them in order to take power. So how insidious this can be. It can be played both sides in the deception. So again and again and again, it comes down to discernment, and then how we're conducting ourselves. And to me, it's also the intent behind however we're doing too. Now, that doesn't override the outcome, but the outcome's a different thing. In the outcome, my end of it, I'm 100% responsible for, the intent behind that. But then how the other person receives it, it's more 50-50, or however we want to split that responsibility.
And that's why when we did the restoration program, the first thing we said was, start working with yourself. You need to complete it. This is self-responsibility. Absolutely. These are the rules of engagement. I put this on my website.
It's empowering too. Self-responsibility is empowering.
It's about under the effect of the effects of the timeline event. And this is where, from me, all spiritual teaching systems, including Buddhism, no matter whatever you're dealing with, it all goes back to, we need to clean up the destruction of the tearing down, the regression, the invertedness, the constant breaking down of the original holographic template that alters our consciousness, that excludes us from perceiving reality as it's supposed to be received, that excludes us from working together as teams because we begin to segregate, we begin to create separatism, that excludes us from the original holographic metaverse, which we were supposed to work our way back to, and relying on technology to continue our existence, that goes in and creates enemies, that goes in and creates division, and all of these kind of
separation,
things.
the inversions, the reversals, the what's the other one? Inversions, reversals, and I'm blanking now, but go ahead. Yeah,
regression.
Thank you.
But the point is that when we talk about these original incidents and that is mirrored into all spiritual teaching systems. It doesn't matter which spiritual teachings you touch ground with. For me, it all ties back to the original advanced civilizations and the way we try to undo the effects of the timeline event, which later on, as this system got hijacked by the regressed races, were turned into religion, were turned into spiritual teaching systems, were turned into the chakra teaching system, were turned into Buddhism, were turned into whatever you come up with, where we have had different teachers that remembered things that used to be, but still interpreted within their type of consciousness, because their template and holographic original energy system had been pushed so far up that they only had remnants of it. They only had minor bleed throughs. They only had little glimpses of how it was done in either deep meditation or deep mindfulness, or through what we call lifelong practices of reconnecting to the original template.
Okay. This reminds me of an exercise called tapping into the wisdom of your future self. Considering that it hasn't been corrupted, right? So if I'm drawing on the wisdom for my future self, how is that? Can I tap into my future self and get wisdom from it?
What if the past and the future are corrupted? That's what I'm saying.
That's what I'm saying. So then that might not be possible.
No.
And then we talk about this omega point, or this end point of what, some might say, well, this is in the future, this is already resolved. All we need to do is just tap into it in the future, and then, connect to that, get the solutions from that, bring it to the now, and then we can go from there. Yeah. But then we have to talk about, well, this omega point, this end point, or whatever, and, the future is still uncertain, right? How does all this play in here?
I need to interrupt you here.
Please.
So, because first and foremost, omega point, that's alpha omega, that's some of the shitty races, but of the old groups. But when we talk about, there are different groups from the future where there are the ones that are on a mission statement that has literally traveled back, not only as in kind of being in stasis, they've dissolved their entire future version. And they have carried a new type of engineering in their holographic template system, in that orb, because you don't need space. This is beyond space and time. We are talking about vibrational consciousness energy units that has no spatial features. By that can be minimized from big complex system, can be minimized into very small units, quantum units, literally. So they have traveled back in time via these different, it's called a transfer chamber, which we kind of saw a little bit of in the movie Déjà Vu, where that technology in a way is being portrayed to the degree we understand it. But they have re-engineered their holographic energy system to be able to come back and withstand some of the challenges that we will have, including being able to undo some of the effects of the timeline event, because they have looked into the history. You see, with these very advanced technologies, you can look back into all timelines of past history, including the ones that never came to be, and with that figure out which one should they try to activate by altering their energy system and configuration into one that will lead to a different outcome. So they have that's what we call a suicide mission. They have traveled back and they have merged themselves into the current version, literally physically, either as type of walk-in, or as a type of a near-death experience, or as a type of early birth, or prior to birth, or shortly after birth, what have you, that version that is themselves now, not taking a vessel that's not theirs, but the version they are. So they had let go of who they are in the future as a sacrifice. And then we have the other group that are in stasis to keep the configuration intact of who we are in the future, so that the cubes have something to ping with. This is the standard. This is the high standard that should be. That's the directive with the ones in stasis. But the problem is with the constant relooping of what's been going on, time has passed to such a degree that some of these future vessels are now deteriorating. And that means these cubes no longer have something to ping with. And that's why they pushed for the time wave to come in play, altering some of the ones that went in the suicide mission, altering their perspective to actually become the evil scientists that open up for that time wave continuum to be created. Again, this is complex science. It's not just for good and for ill an easy peasy thing.
These devices, is this what some people refer to as the looking glass devices? Have you heard of these? looking glass technology, and then some people say at a certain point they're all seeing the same result at a certain point, but then other people have said they've rebooted them or not. I don't know if these are the devices.
For me that's kind of as far as on a remote viewing, right? You look into the
no, this is actually supposed to, it's similar, but this is actually a device, so you don't even have to do
but if the device is only configured to play on 3 timelines, you will end up with what's on these 3 timelines. So you have to have these future technologies that can run on all possible timelines, even the ones that might not even have the potential to even come into play. But if there are consciousness units connected to these timelines, anyone can ignite it. Anything can come in play if there's one human that goes there. So this is the technology we are dealing with. Is not that everything ends in the same singularity. Here, talking about the end of the big crunch compared to the Big Bang, which is the idea of the alpha omega. You have the beginning, you have the end that goes with that. But that's kind of what we call, again, some of the dark races.
What's before and after that, right?
Yes, exactly. so this is just playing with the idea of creation that is created out of a single point, and it will crush in a single point, which of course the way I see things doesn't exist, because everything that is constantly changed with the change of consciousness and change with the energy configuration of the living beings that are inhabiting the multiple universes that we are part of.
And
so
cycles
it's not just
too,
one,
exactly.
but the whole sphere as a beginning and an end that science are able to see, where they are always the center point in whatever concentric circle they are observing. They are observing it from their central point of energy and consciousness vibrational pattern. So they do see it as this is the one end of the spectrum and this is the other, because that's their own limitations they're viewing.
Sure.
But when we play with the future type of sciences, we are playing with so many possible futures that are there that it just takes those of us who have come from the future, it just takes us to begin to ignite all of the other possible timelines that did not come in play in this time. And that's why we need to do the reconfiguration. That's why we need to get our shit together and do the energy work that's needed to activate that sphere, that configuration that will allow us to tie in and dive in to the code streams of the unused timelines that would have led to the proper outcome after the timeline event, where we healed up, where we would be able to restore as a solar system race.
And a lot of races are trying to do that with technology, while there's those of us trying to do it with natural consciousness and energy. Yes. So are these devices also maybe similar to the holographic teaching systems, although just on different, more timeline specific, right?
Well, the holographic teaching system were part of the Pillar Project and the restoration program. So they're kind of what we call old technology. Whereas these other devices are alien infused, and they are from partially sciences that were granted to the enhanced humans and humans of the future from the Andromeda system, which we will merge with. But it's not, it doesn't run the same what we call progressive dynamics. It doesn't link up to the elevation cycles of the original universal structures, which the holographic teaching systems were calibrated to do. So whatever we got in contact with, the purpose of that was to elevate and get reconnected to the holographic metaverse, or the original progressive civilizations.
Just a couple more things here that we can start to wind up. We talked a lot about the time wave continuum, and we didn't talk about particles so much, is how they might play into this too, like the double slit experiment. So these different particle bases, does it affect the time, the waves?
In essence, particles doesn't exist.
I say, so
that's
easy answer.
They're kind of an illusion completely, because everything is a wave. But as it congregates and creates what we call spheres in the manner that we understand as particles have what we kind of call a trinity build-up. Atom, the atom is built up by electron, neutron, and protons. Yes, so these are the subparticles as we understand of them. But when we go into the higher order sciences, the neutron in itself is just a fixed point, and the proton is kind of what we call the original density energy. So it's an oscillation in itself. It's a wave in itself. And we go with the electron, that is a frequency wave. And the moment the frequency energy ceases to exist, then the electron ceases to exist as well. And then all we have got is a quantum field that will then be imbued with what we call original density or fourth dimensional dynamics. That will affect the proton, and that will affect the neutron, which is the point zero of all quantum fields. So that's where the quantum fields goes in and affects the particle. Once that begins to happen, then the particle no longer exists.
So what does reality look like at that point then?
It is all depending on how we perceive reality. That's some of the challenges that we have. Again, when we talk about the Eightfold Path, and people think it leads to enlightenment, but in my perspective, it leads to a behavior that actually will allow us to operate where energy responds directly with how we think and how we feel and how we behave, and whatever we say is a sound wave. Once we begin to understand the reality of waves, our sound will affect reality, and it will mirror back through the law of reciprocity that what we send out will come back as a wave that kicks us in the butt. Once we stop having these limitations to our emotional field and becomes the vibrational field where we connect to timelines, compassion and understanding of mindfulness and truthful existence for the highest good of the many, becoming harmless, is enormously important to avoid distortion energy to be created. And our mind field must be clear in observance and always be conscious about what we're doing, because the way we think about things are a type of radiation energy that can lead to some pretty disastrous effects on our holographic network behind a reality field. So this is not to be taken lightly. No. So enlightenment is to have the full responsibility and accountability and caring in the true manner of the world that we're actually part of. Not just other people, but the reality itself.
Thought, words, and actions, how we're viewing, yes, and the ability to get there and the training to do so. So the cubes themselves, I mean, this is kind of the juicy topic. We won't go too far into this right now because we've spent enough time.
No, I think actually we have said enough.
Sure, I think so. Yeah, and Randy and I have talked about this off mic about what could possibly be done with these cubes. But I want to stress here more than any of the external things. It's not too juicy to listen to. Of do the work, right? Do the inner work, and what we think, do, and say matters. Our choices are profoundly significant. I mean, we don't have to get freaked out by like, okay, are we going to walk at this rate or walk slower or something silly like that? I mean, we don't want to have this turn into obsessive compulsive thing, right? But everything matters, everything's important. So whether we choose to do something or not, choosing not to do something is still a type of choice. It could be. So any other solutions or things you'd like to leave with the listeners here?
Well, I would kind of put in that we are in completely uncharted territory right now, because the fabric of our reality is changing, and it's changing for good and for ill. It's being changed by humans that doesn't know what they're dealing with. It's been changed from the future that's trying to avoid all the shenanigans and stupidities humans are doing right now. And it's not about creating division and ill-mindedness and flame off these old infectious type of consciousness potentials, because that's in the mix as well. And we have enough counterforces that wants to ignite that and wants to ignite that in humanity. So those of us, not that we are better, not that we are superior, not that we are sovereign, not that we are connected to God, and not that we are whatever people want to put in the mix so they can boost up and inflate their ego structure. Actually, this is for the humble. It's always been said, this work is for the humble. This is for the ones that will always investigate everything that they want to do from so many angles that sometimes it takes eons before they even move, sit in silent contemplation until all timelines and all possibilities have been investigated to make sure that the choice that's being made will lead to the highest outcome of the many. The only way we can become more efficient in this is to begin to clear up our three lower fields. And I keep saying the same thing again and again and again and again, and I'll say it one more time. Those of you out there who do want to make a change, who do want to ensure there is a future for humanity at all, that does not go into doomsday thoughts, that do not respond to all the psychological past, present, current, whatever traumas we have. It all begins with ourselves. It begins with our own psychological investigation. It begins with taking our own psychological developmental processes seriously, and also do psychotherapy, do self-healing work, do self-clearing work, do inner work, do whatever we can, not within context of different forms of spirituality, not because we want to flee from this reality, not because we want to escape from our pain or our sadness or whatever's going on, but because we know this is our damn responsibility. Those of us who are from the future, it's our damn responsibility to make sure that that does not happen. So that's kind of what I want to say.
Very well.